welcome back. I have a special guest that the introduction is going to take a little bit of concentration to try to get all the achievements and everything there and the synopsis, the summary. But today I have Dr. Sheldon Greaves with me. He is not only an author, he's somebody that is very passionate with nonprofit work, very definitive. And as far as his motif, as I can say that, his motif of finding education and through and academics through different various resources, his ways of implementing that is something special and that kind of brought to my attention where as an instructional designer I'm very intrigued by that. So we're going to dive a little bit into that and the fact that you just have to respect the fact that there's a doctor in front of the Sheldon Greaves. You just got to respect that. So my guest here is Dr. Sheldon Greaves. Thank you very much for joining me. And what have you been up to lately?
Well, lately I have been digging in partly as a ghostwriter for a gentleman back east who's working on a novel. But when I'm not doing that, I am posting to my Substack, which is guerrillascholar.com. And I'm out in the world trying to promote my new book, The Guerrilla Scholar's Handbook, which is a little bit memoir. It's a little bit how-to for people who are interested in taking control of their learning and their intellectual lives. And it's also, I guess, kind of become a bit of a manifesto in the last little while because of the way education and even the whole idea of expertise is being regarded now. I kind of feel like it's time that we all sort of take back um, our freedom to learn and to explore and to think our own thoughts and uh, stop worrying about building a resume and start building your mind.
That I, that is so impressive that you said that as, someone that mentors and coaches, different people from all different walks of life and understanding that wherever they start and where they finish are two different areas and it's the continuing education of growth. The Gorilla Scholar, that jumped out at me the moment that you said that and the moment that I've like seen the information that jumped out at me. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the concept of like the Gorilla Scholar?
Yeah, so I'm using guerrilla in the same sense as unconventional. So, like guerrilla warfare is also referred to as unconventional warfare. And right now, a lot of what we think is going on intellectually is happening on university campuses. But what happens on campus tends to stay on campus. It doesn't always come out into the rest of the world where we can see it. And they also tend to have their own ways of doing things. And sometimes the usual way isn't the best way. Um, what I the way I define guerrilla scholarship is getting creative about how you approach the art of learning and the art of thinking and coming to know what's going on in the world, but also learning not just to get tenure or to rack up publications. It's learning for empowerment and it's learning for pleasure. Because learning is fun. It's what we do. There are a few phrases that puzzle me more than what you see on some educational products that say makes learning fun. To me, that makes about as much sense as saying makes breathing fun, because, we just do it. It's part of what we do as part of our everyday life, whether you're scanning the tabloids in the checkout line or you're reading Homer in the original Greek, we do it. We love it. We just love to take in information, although we're not always very deliberate about what we take in, and that's another discussion altogether.
Absolutely. The intent of education or the intent. But you mentioned something again that again as an instructional designer, I know we
Hmm.
could bat back and forth with this for quite some time. The psychology of play is always something that we try to introduce into,
Hmm.
course creation, course content, even personal development and coaching. We try to, get this strategy together so that it doesn't seem so, cumbersome to people as far as, their development and their process. They even
Hmm.
have, life apps to where now you can gamify your app of taking out the trash and doing these things. So it's, it's kind of funny, to think about it in that way that we are,
Hmm.
so subjected to that, that structure of if it's not work, if it's not,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts about that? Because it seems to me like, the guerrilla tactic or the guerrilla scholar idea there is just, being able to attack knowledge from different angles.
Well, that is a lot of it, and frankly, that's a lot of the fun. Is finding a different way to approach some problem that that other people aren't thinking of. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I One of the things that I've done in my uh, checkered past is I was a co-founder for a university that offered programs to intelligence, counterterrorism, and executive protection people. And one of the things we did was we had a seminar for local high school students who came in and learned about the intelligence world and, whether it was be a career fit for them. So I was giving a seminar on intelligence collection and analysis, and I was telling them, okay, so I now have uh, an intelligence requirement for you, which is, here's a thing that you need to go solve. And I got all serious and I says, okay, now, the fate of the free world is hanging on your ability to answer this question. And the question is, does the Kremlin have a swimming pool? And there were got some funny looks. I says, you can use anything, do any, try any method you want as long as it's legal. That's cool. So of course they all went home and they went to Google and to Google Earth, and they're spending the night looking at satellite photos trying to find swimming pools at the Kremlin. They come back, guys, it's Russia. The climate, outdoor swimming pools, no, not a thing. So anyway, I told them to go back and get creative. Well, long story short, finally somebody did get creative. They picked up the phone, they called the Russian consulate in San Francisco, and they asked somebody. You know, it's like one person thought of that, you know. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to get them away from the usual track of looking for information, and they had a ball. Say, oh, actually call the consulate. That was cool. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. I mean, you find a different way to look at something. Not only can you sometimes find things that other people miss, and that's huge when that happens, but you also see something from a different angle, and maybe, just maybe, you will spot something that no one else has noticed before about what it is you're interested in. And that's also huge. And it's deeply satisfying when an insight like that hits you.
I find this absolutely fascinating. Um, and I'm gonna nerd out just a second because um, I as an avid gamer,
Hmm.
there's a gentleman by the name of Hideo Kojima who
Hmm.
is very popular, very well known. If you don't know the name, you may know some of his work.
Hmm.
He is very infamous with doing the Metal Gear Solid series and a couple other
Mm,
things. And
okay.
he's the guy that, before the days of the internet and you had to search stuff where he created the character where you had to switch the controller into the socket 2 to beat him and so on and so forth. But he did something, within the last decade of a
Uh,
game called PT, and it does a deconstructive learner theory. I wrote like a
hmm.
thesis about it, and he created this horror game that had no instructions, no descriptions, no strategy base to it. You downloaded it and it started playing, and his thoughts were, why would something that's provoking horror or terror help you? and it
Ooh.
was very, I thought you would find that fascinating. So it was
Oh.
very interesting to watch this. And like I said, I did the whole paper and everything about it. And your guerrilla warfare, like your guerrilla tactics to education, seems to kind of align with that. There's no boundaries.
Hmm.
There's no boundaries here. So how do you go about that? And you're taking away the structure of that
Yeah.
formula and that format and saying, now, what would you do if I didn't tell you what to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the innovation happens. I mean, yeah, it is true to an extent that necessity is the mother of invention. But we were talking before, if you make a game out of it and if you have fun with it, in many respects, play is as much the mother of invention as anything. And you mentioned games. There's an example in my book about a gentleman who had recently graduated in economics, but he couldn't find a job, teaching or, at a university, which is what he wanted. So while he was conducting his job search, he started playing EverQuest.
Okay.
And of course, EverQuest has stuff where you accumulate treasure and gold and their currency are these platinum pieces. But the thing about EverQuest is if you have like say a magic axe or whatever, you can give it to someone else in the game, another player. And that wasn't a particularly noticeable thing for him until he found an eBay site where people were selling EverQuest items for real dollars. And what he realized was that he was looking at a currency exchange where people were exchanging EverQuest platinum pieces for dollars. So he drew up his spreadsheets and he did an analysis and he discovered that the EverQuest platinum piece was something like the 42nd strongest currency on the planet. Yeah. and, and out of this came this whole new approach to using large scale multiplayer games as a way of examining actual living economies, which you can't do in real life because there are no knobs to twiddle and to control the money supply and all that. And if it goes the wrong way, bad things happen. But this is just an example, another example of just using something that no one would have considered um, to look at something as big as, a national economy.
Well, first off, I would be directly offended and insulted being the 43rd form of curse. If there was something out there, I would be offended. That's fascinating that you said that.
Hmm.
Um, and so in a dream, in an unconstricted dream world of yours,
Hmm.
what would this guerrilla, scholar look like in action and play if you had to rehaul like
Hmm.
the entire education system, what would this look like for you?
What it would look like for me is that what people would be taught would be uh, active curiosity, making sure that that's sustained, that it's continued. A lot of schools are trying to do this. For a while, I was working as a substitute for the last couple of years at the local school district. So I've seen them where they're trying to do this. I would also spend a lot more time away from the screens and getting people into the real world, partly because I think there are places where the screens just aren't appropriate. I watched a kindergarten teacher with 32 kids trying to get them all logged onto their iPads. Yeah, that you can imagine how well that went.
Yeah.
It just didn't work. Um, but I would also have them spending more time at the local public library, get them involved in that, get them to see that learning doesn't stop when you step off of the school campus. I would like to bring, I would like to see local groups, local community groups forming that are involved in different kinds of things, like we used to have a lot more like bird watching clubs or astronomy clubs or model rocket clubs or things of that sort, and get them involved in uh, in the educational process. Because one thing that kids notice is if the grown-ups are interested in it, they're probably going to be interested in it too. That's kind of where it was with me with my parents. My mother was very active in the local public library. My dad was a was well traveled. He spoke fluent French, and he always kept his mind going and alert and was constantly reading stuff, and that rubbed off on us. Um, the other thing too that I kind of wish that we still had was some kind of national initiative that involved learning and the life of the mind. For me, growing up, it was the space race, you know, and
Okay. Yeah.
water, funding poured out like a river for public schools. Um, with what was it, 1958, the Defense and Education Act, which was signed basically the year I was born. And so by the time I got to first grade, all those lovely tools were waiting for me. And it was not only supported to be smart and geeky, it was actually patriotic, you know. Um, so, that kind of atmosphere, I would love to see that atmosphere change. Um, and basically, I think the other thing that I would love to see is at the university level, and this does trickle down, I wish they would stop putting so much emphasis on education for career and more on education as, what was that wonderful old phrase, preparation for life, where
I
you take
understand.
seriously the idea that you're forming yourself, you're developing a personal philosophy, you're deciding what is my impact going to be in the world apart from where I work and how much money I make. Those are a few things that I would do. I would also make a greater effort to make people aware of many information sources that are out there right now that nobody knows about. I'm thinking specifically government documents are a huge resource. No one knows they're there, but they're kind of a secret weapon if you know how to use them.
It in my time of growing up and building and educating, um, I I graduated in '95. That's
Hmm.
when I graduated high school, and during the '90s, being a comic book artist or a cartoonist was
Hmm.
not a career. It was not a career path. It was not even thought about. And good luck convincing your guidance counselor that that's what you wanted to do was to draw funny pictures. So
Yeah, have fun working at the car wash,
that was that was pretty much what was told. And
Yeah.
and what you're saying, it just kind of, reminiscent of that moment is I do feel like there is a educational gap of what's
Hmm.
available and what's coming.
Yeah.
We don't really know that, so we don't know
Hmm.
how to embrace for it. And then
Hmm.
there is that gap of how do we develop all these different things and all these different skills and all
Hmm.
this different technology, and then help direct the people that are in the midst of growing up during that time period and that time
Hmm.
frame, and we're preparing them from what. So there's
Yeah.
there's that huge thing there, and I feel like we're on the verge of trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
Like I feel
Yeah.
like we're right there on the edge. 6, 7 years ago, QR codes weren't really a thing, but
Hmm.
they were prevalent. They were already
Hmm.
there. They
Yeah.
just nobody was using them to figure out how to use it. And I like to say that the speed of information and the speed of technology travels at two different paces.
This
So
is true. You're absolutely right.
so when we figure it out, by the time we figure it out, I think there's other things that we start to figure out as we roll. And
Hmm.
but I love what you're doing, the embrace of information and how we develop that information. Again, I'm a trapper keeper kid, and I remember the multiplication tables and everything there. So
Oh yeah. Oh
so
yeah.
I it was practical skills that was
Yeah.
applied right there with us,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
how we moved forward. So what was the turning point that led you down this moment that said, this is the path, this is like where it needs to be, this is where I need to go?
Well, there were two things. The first was a book that I encountered right at the beginning of my doctoral studies by a guy named Ronald Gross, and it was called The Independent Scholar's Handbook. And this was my first exposure to the idea that people can do serious intellectual work outside of the university, and that, in fact, a lot of the really interesting and innovative thinking was taking place outside of the university. Just one quick example, there was a book in the late 1950s that was written by a guy named Eric Hoffer called The True Believer, which was just an absolutely incredibly insightful study on the nature of mass movements. Eric Hoffer was a dock worker in San Francisco. He had no formal degree training or anything, but he used his observations of daily life, and he was a voracious reader. It was rumored that he would hop, the rail lines up and down the state, looking for work, and he had library cards from pretty much every major public library along those rail routes. Um, the other um, the other thing that uh, pushed me in this direction was I wasn't the only one who was working on a doctorate. My wife was also working on her doctorate at Stanford. And so basically, we were a newly married couple and we were putting two kids through college, namely each other.
Oh,
And so we eventually came to this arrangement where I would go to school for a year and she would work. And then the next year, she would go to school and I would work. So when I wasn't registered at school, I still had to keep up with my field. So I had to get creative because I didn't have access to the university resources. So that kind of forced the issue. And I guess there was one more thing too, and that was this was all happening in the Bay Area right at the beginning of the computer revolution. And there was just an amazing amount of really cool stuff going on. And I kind of got sucked into a lot of that. I mean, yeah, I'm here I am at Berkeley learning to read clay tablets while on my off hours, my wife and I are members in good standing of the local astronomical society. So I'm kind of leading this weird double life. And as I got toward the end of my degree, I realized that I was expected to pick a lane intellectually and stay in that lane. And that's kind of how it is in academia. You pick, one specialty area of specialty, and that's your life. And I didn't want to do that because there are too many other really interesting things going on. And I also discovered that um, my professors, some of them at least, were just amazing as long as you were talking about something in their lane. But the minute you mentioned a subject outside of that, they suddenly got really dull and uninteresting.
right.
So, so I didn't want that either. So well, that and trying to find a job in the humanities back then was only slightly less difficult than it is today, but it was still kind of a sucker's bet. So I just started working, doing technical writing and looking for other opportunities to do other things. And if you keep your eyes open and if you're, and more to the point, keep your mind open, you can find ways to use a good education um, to do some really amazing things. And if you don't have a great education, there are ways to acquire it. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book is how do you uh, start the path of lifelong learning.
Yeah, is this something that you help people do, develop that pattern of lifelong learning, forever being a student, forever being diligent in that? Is that something that you help with one-on-one, or is that more with the book, or is there a program?
Right now, it's more with the book. I'm looking for ways to maybe develop something like what you're talking about. I do volunteer as a scholar in residence at the church that we attend. It's an Episcopal church in Corvallis. And there have been some people there that I've assisted in either starting something new, a new subject that they're not familiar with, or in more cases, it's somebody dusting off some previous hobby or love that they kind of abandoned for whatever reason, and they're thinking, "Hey, I want to go back to that. That was pretty cool."
Well, we
Um,
often lose track of that in the hustle and bustle of the day. I'm
we
sorry,
do.
go
I've
ahead.
done it. Yeah,
Go
totally.
ahead. I'm sorry. You're
No,
making
no,
me think
that's
about my childhood on things.
no, but it's absolutely true. And that's kind of a shame because I believe that there is a vast reservoir of untapped, unused talent and experience and expertise out there that is just kind of it doesn't have an outlet. And there was a time when there were more community organizations and things like local salons and clubs and whatnot, where these kinds of things could get together and you could bring people with diverse backgrounds together and let them kind of figure, feel each other out intellectually. For a long time, I used to have coffee with a gentleman who was a retired professor of civil engineering. And here I was, my degree was in ancient Near Eastern studies. You'd wonder what the hell would we have to say to each other? But it turned out we had quite a lot to say to each other and learned a lot from each other because, um, I come from the study of, a world that was, and he's interested in the world that is and where we're going. And I suppose a common denominator might be, what happens to a civilization as it starts moving into old age and decrepitude. And, that's just one of many things that we found ourselves talking about. But that was a very fruitful relationship.
Awesome. I'm sure that was an educational conversation dialogue a little bit above my head, but it just sounds like it sounds fascinating. I'm always
Mhm.
fascinated with the unknown and
Mm.
the development of that. So which leads me to my question that I ask of all of my guests. And it sounds like you have a long list. So what what keeps you motivated? What led you from this one point to the next?
hmm Um, I suppose the one thing I am the most passionate about is creating and forming learning communities, even if it's just one or two people. Uh, I'm also very much invested in the development of an intellectually active global citizenry. But at the end of the day, it comes back to, for me, the fact that learning is just a pleasure. There's a wonderful quote from the novel The Once and Future King by T.H. White, where Merlin the magician is giving advice to this newly crowned King Arthur, who's not feeling real great about the way certain things are going, and he says, um, "The best thing for being sad is to learn something. That is the only thing that never fails. You may grow old and trembling in your anatomies. You may lie awake at night listening to the disorder of your veins. You may miss your only love. You may see the world about you devastated by evil lunatics or know your honor trampled in the sewers of baser minds. There's only one thing for it then, to learn. Learn why the world wags and what wags it. That is the only thing the mind can never exhaust, never alienate, never be tortured by, never fear or distrust, and never dream of regretting." That's my philosophy in a nutshell.
I'm gonna let that marinate for a little bit before that's okay. That's that's incredible. So with that being said,
hmm
where can people reach you? I know we've covered a lot of things,
hmm
and I want to respect your time in these final moments here. Where do people reach you? Where do they find you? Where do they find your content? What are you doing that people
hmm
can look up and get to instantly?
Probably the best place right now is my Substack, which is the Guerrilla Scholar. You just look that up and you'll find me. You can also, I occasionally do post on Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and uh, Facebook. I have a Gorilla Scholar page on Facebook, and that's pretty much it. I try to keep I haven't gone completely all in on the social media thing, partly because I just don't have time to maintain all these accounts. But those are the best places to reach me. And then, of course, there's the book, which is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, thrift books. And if you go to my publisher, which is spines.com, they have links to the audiobook. I know, I'm pretty sure Google Play has it,
Okay.
and some other outlets. You can find it there. And it's also now available in Spanish.
Awesome. Awesome. We are a multicultural household here, and so there is some Spanish speakers here in the house, and that's quite impressive.
Excellent. All right.
Well, doctor, I will let you conclude the rest of your day in the evening. I want to thank you wholeheartedly for sharing that and that information and the uplifting, atmosphere and the environment that you are not only presenting, but your pursuit for knowledge is a testament. As somebody that designs content, I think it's absolutely amazing, and I want to thank you for your diligence and your work. So. Hopefully,
Thank you, Leland.
I'll be getting an autographed copy at some. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I will try to look that up and read more into it because it is fascinating for me for personal development all the times. So
Wonderful.
thank you, Dr. Sheldon Greaves. Thank you very much, and I will catch you. Everybody else, go find this man.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Leland.
Every day is a blessing. The time we spent together. All we can do is promote change. 24 hours better.